So I was just saying to Klaus, my partner in crime for today, that we're not looking at the numbers of people, but your commitment that you're here means that you're as passionate about urban mobility as Klaus and I am. So I'm from European Commission DG Transport. The first Elena project that I ever heard about 4 years ago, was the Aarhus tram project. So I'm really pleased that you're here, Britta. I heard many good things about it. I heard about technology. I heard about the way you're working together with many different types of government and public bodies. And I'm really happy that the tram is running. Yeah? So that is a great result, a great project. So what we're going to do again is I invite you to come and present what you're doing in Aarhus and how the Elena project has helped you in that. And then, like always, like for the 5th time, I think, today, there's an opportunity for a Q&A. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for your questions in advance.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. As you said, I work for Aarhus Light Rail. I work for a construction company, so it's a bit different compared to some of the people that have been here before. We have the construction company is a private-public body, and we have received an Elena grant of 1.9 million euro to realize an investment of roughly 460 million euros in Denmark's first light rail. We are almost done. We opened the first stage for public in December 2017. I have some different slides today, and as you said in your introduction, some of the projects that we have done have a very technical character, but they have been necessary to go through in order to realize the project and in order to gain the CO2 reduction and the energy efficiency that we all wanted as a goal. If it's too technical, I will try and go through it really fast, but I think it's important to understand that it's also an opportunity to get Elena funding to something that is extremely complex, where you need additional technical assistance to strengthen your organization. Especially in a small country like Denmark, it's sometimes difficult to find the right knowledge. Just roughly, where is Aarhus for the people that don't know? We are situated at the peninsula of Jutland, and Aarhus is the second growth center of Denmark, besides Copenhagen, of course. It's a city of almost 1.2 million people in the city region, and it's what we say is a very young city because we have 55,000 students and a top university. The municipality of Aarhus has, like several of the other people that have presented today, a climate action plan that goes towards CO2 neutral and no fossil fuels in 2030. And here, there's been one extremely important strategic focus area for the municipality, and that is to look at energy efficiency in the transportation sector. And here, the establishing of Denmark's first light rail was one of the main goals to reach the goal. What is the first light rail in Denmark consisting of? And this is where it starts to becoming a bit difficult, is that it actually not only consists of new infrastructure, it also consists of upgrading and integrating 2 older railway lines. And more than that, we also have to have a system where we keep freight capacity on part of the rail line. That is the rail line marked with blue here. And that is to secure that in the future it's possible to have, we have an extremely big producer of offshore windmills in this region up here. And it's a political wish that you secure the opportunity to also have bigger freight components on the light rail track in the future. We have built 2 kilometers of new double track. We have prepared a full electrification of the combined 112 kilometers of lines. We have built a new control and maintenance center, and we have bought 23 new light rail vehicles. The 12 new kilometers of the central light rail corridor is essentially what is making this project into a light rail network, because we are connecting 2 old railways with a new piece of infrastructure in the city center of Aarhus. It combines what we call the axis of knowledge. So it combines from Aarhus Central Station to the new public library, the School of Engineering, Aarhus University, Royal National Library, the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, a new university hospital, with a large amount of new urban developments in the northern part of Aarhus. So these are the more central facts to understand the complexity of the light rail project. So essentially we were building a new urban line in the city of Aarhus. It's a classical tram system. We drive on site. It has a restriction where you cannot go further than 80 kilometers an hour, which is the max speed. And the owner of the infrastructure is Aarhus Light Rail. We had to combine that with a line that's called the Grenaa line, where we had the wish and to go a maximum of 100 kilometers an hour. Why? Because for us, travel speed is important. We want the customers to come from the northern parts of the eastern Jutland region to the municipality of Aarhus as fast as possible. When you make that dual switch in transportation, that also means that you cannot be approved to drive on site anymore. You have to drive on signals. So all of a sudden you have a project that both have to integrate driving on site and driving on signals. Furthermore, the owner of the infrastructure here, because it was an existing railway, was Railnet Denmark. So initially we had to take over the infrastructure from the existing owner. We also had to prepare for a new stop at Aarhus Central Station. That was a building that was owned by the Danish National Rail Company. And furthermore, I will come back to this, we had to take into consideration the fact that in Denmark we do not have electrification of the rail network in similar ways that you have in the rest of Europe, which means that the whole signaling at Aarhus Central Station, where you have a row of 8 tracks, none of those signals were prepared for electrification, and that was causing problems. I will come back to that. Last but not least, we were to integrate what we called the other line, not other, but other. Sorry, that's how it is with language. Here, again, we were to drive on signals, and the infrastructure here was an old rail company called Midtjyske Jernbaner that had to initially hand over the infrastructure to Aarhus Light Rail. We had to prepare for that as well. So initially, we were in a situation where we had several complex challenges that we had to overcome to finalize our project. We had some technical issues. We were the first in Denmark. There were no rules, no norms. We had to develop them. We had a dual system network where we're driving both 80 and 100 kilometers an hour. We had to prepare for rail fight capacity. We had to prepare the signal system at Aarhus H. We were running through 4 municipalities. We're also running through 4 different energy supply companies. We had to make agreements with them. All of this is, of course, is a huge job when it comes to stakeholder management. And besides that, there was still a will at our organization to work whatever we could to try and improve the energy efficiency as much as possible. So that's why we decided to apply for ELENA funding to help us gain more funding to prepare for the integration of these existing railways. We applied to say that we had 2 work programs. One was the more technical part where we prepared for the technical integration, and the other was where we tried to look at energy efficiency matters. We had several projects described in our application, and we have developed all of these projects. I do not have the time to go through all of them, so I have highlighted a few of them that I will go through now, both from both work packages. I'll try and describe a bit about what we've done with our platforms, some of the signaling systems, and some of the infrastructure management contracts. And finally, in the end, I'll sum up where we are in terms of energy and energy efficiency and what we have achieved in that matter. Just as a brief time schedule, we started the ELENA program in 2013 and ended it in 2016. I think that's to say 2012 was the time where the Aarhus Light Rail Act was initiated, and from then it was the funding was in place. So the technical integration of existing platforms is just, this is where it gets technical. I'll do it very fast. One issue for us was that the existing platforms that we were looking at the 2 old railways, were essentially too high. They have built at a norm where they are 50 centimeters above level, and in order to get them approved for a light rail network, we had to get them all down to 30 centimeters. It's both from a safety point of view, but it's also from an accessible point of view. It's simply not allowed to walk into a train because of emergency situations. If people are stuck in the train, they have to evacuate out of the train. They cannot fall out of a platform into the platform. But besides that, we also had to look at the situation where this, what we call the structural gauge, which means how wide the train is. The system has to incorporate 2 things. Both the fact that it's a light rail tram, which is one width, and then also a freight train, which is a lot wider. So we had to look at innovative way to design platforms that could take all these measures into account. What we did was, of course, to design, to initiate with some studies to find out what solutions are out there, looking elsewhere in Europe, looking elsewhere in the world. We was, besides that, defining a new norm. What can be safety approved in Denmark by the authorities on this issue? And the result was that we have prepared, and this is actually where we are, we're still finalizing the last platforms, but we have initially built a sort of what we call a gap bridging device, where we have actually on all platforms, we have built this thing that we can put up, so that when the special trains go through, we can be allowed to go through, but at normal situations they are always down. I say what we learned from this was that definitely it was hard to find ideal solutions here. There are many pros and cons that have to be taken into consideration. But also, of course, because these platforms are still not owned by Aarhus Light Rail, they're still owned by Railnet Denmark. We had to go through a lot of stakeholder management to agree on the actual solution before doing it. We also have another technical project here, which is, we were looking at the signaling assets at Aarhus Central Station. And our problem was that we had, and it was still very technical, a lot of track circuits, which means that they are relays that are basically changing the signals. So green, red for the trains to come in and out. All these relays were not prepared for the electrification, which essentially means that when we come through, Aarhus Central Station, there was the risk that the signals from all other tracks but the light rail would change from green to red, simply because the electricity would influence on the track circuits. This risk has not been anywhere in our project, described. And all of a sudden, in the project we were looking, I have to take some water, sorry. All of a sudden we were looking at a project that had an estimated cost of 80 million kroner, roughly 10 million euro. And this was of course a huge risk for our project because we did not initially know, there was nobody that was a specialist at this point to tell us that this was a project that we should think of. I think I'll go through this fast. We were looking at several solutions. We were looking at specialists out in Europe, especially in Great Britain and Sweden, to find similar situations. This situation had never occurred in Denmark. We were the first. And we actually succeeded in finding another solution called FETR that we could, by having a dialogue with the authorities about approval, by having a dialogue with the stakeholders about implementing this on their infrastructure, we succeeded in implementing this. Furthermore, we actually succeeded in, because we find some smarter solutions than the original one, also to have a cost reduction of 40% compared to the first project. For us, for our owners, this is a big success story because these are money that you do not get a more beautiful tram for this or a more beautiful platform. But this is just a very technical project that has to be done from a safety point of view. A last thing is we had to do a lot of infrastructure management contract with all the different owners of the railroads, existing railroads. And these are just an idea of contracts that we have to do. It became clear to us that to go through and do all these projects would be a huge task. And when we got the funding from Elena, it helped us to actually hire a direct staff that was at our project for 3 years, securing us with these projects. And that was extremely important for us because that was actually gave us the opportunity for the people at the other companies to meet the same person every time they contacted us. When you do these kind of contracts, it takes a long time and it has to go through a lot of boards and a lot of steering groups and a lot of to secure the final signature. We are almost there, but we actually still have a few agreements that we are working on to finalize. So some general lessons learned from a technical point of view was that the standardization and the conversion of existing infrastructure is more complex than expected. As a vision, it's easy to say we will take some existing infrastructure and convert it into a light rail and a tramway system. But it was a huge task to overcome for the organization. We have found a lot of technical issues and technical solutions that can be used actually for other projects in Denmark that are working with similar situations because there are other light rail projects coming. So we have already been in dialogue with them. We have found solutions to save on construction costs. We have also learned, and maybe it's because I'm from Denmark, that sometimes it is very hard to find the right skilled expertise when you have this amount of projects. And I think especially here, I think the awareness that we got Elena granting, all of a sudden, at least in our organization, we become part of a more European family. We could look more outside the boundaries. We were not as afraid to look outside the borders of Denmark. I think that was an extremely important lesson. So that was the technical issue, roughly on what we have for the power supply. And maybe I should have started with this. Why was this a good idea to convert the existing railroads? This is basically showing the consumption when we used to run just with diesel trains. And this shows the consumption when just the conversion from diesel to electric trains with running the exactly same timetable as we did before. So by converting from diesel to electrification, we have saved almost 40%. When we started working with energy efficiency in our project, we started by simply mapping the energy consumption to understand where do we spend the most energy. And not surprisingly, of course, it came out that traction power was the way to focus. What we did was we initiated from the beginning 3 studies, and I think some of them has been mentioned here today as well. We looked at energy storage systems, we looked at driver advisory system, and mobility models. Our problem when we did this was that we simply developed them too late in our project. At this point, we were already starting construction, and we did not have the means to actually incorporate them. When we realized that, we would say, okay, we need more information before we can do the business case to actually implement this project. So what was decided from our board was, and from our owners, was that these studies that we have are extremely important for Aarhus Light Rail, but we cannot implement them before we can do the right business case based on the actual operation. Because we were so close to actually be in operation, they needed to have the actual numbers before the business case was right to them. So maybe in a year's time, we will go back when we have been in operation for a while and look at it again. What we decided instead was then, okay, we cannot focus on studies, we have to look at the project. We have to focus on making what we can do right now. So what we did was we focused on the tram and the tramways, and we have initially bought standard trains with no extra designs, but we actually ended up buying some additions. So in the system of Aarhus Light Rail, we have a regeneration of brake energy, and it was mentioned before earlier today, which is an extremely good system for us because we have high frequency on the central part of the section in Aarhus. We have that the brake energy is transformed into other vehicles. It's also if it can't go into other vehicles, it will be used for the ventilation systems. We have a double layered thermal glass, which is an extra cost, but important for the Danish climate. We have LED, and we have some intelligent heating systems, which is important for the operations afterwards. We've also worked on gaining a sustainable construction and maintenance center. We have a low energy building with green roofs. We have also incorporated a Lex-NOx roof, which is basically capturing the NOx particles from the air. We have built a covering of the stapling area. We also have a rainwater management systems where we use the rainwater to wash the trams. And also a flood rainwater management where we have retention ponds to reduce the risk of flooding in the area. We're situated very low, so there's a risk of flooding. So, yeah, that was it.
Ah, excellent. Excellent. I want to have all of this in Brussels. So, I really would like to thank you for your openness. You also mentioned what did not work so well, where you learned many lessons. I think those are as important as all the successes. And I would like to thank you so much for sharing this with us. I already have many questions. Do you have, as the diehards in mobility, have questions for Britta?
Is Aarhus,
Yeah.
Light Rail a public company? I mean, public owned?
Yes. We are owned by the municipality of Aarhus and the central Denmark region.
So it was difficult for you to purchase the existing rail lines to the national
That
company?
actually you had to go through an act, an Aarhus Light Rail Act is called, and it was through the parliament in Denmark, the Danish government.
They transferred to you, or you have to pay money to get it?
That's actually that's why we ended up having so many stakeholders, because initially the government and the region and the municipality could not agree on the price of the Grenaa line. So in order to initiate and get on with the project, it was approved from a political point of view that we should the state should just keep the Grenaa railway line, not discuss the economic issue anymore. We just keep the infrastructure. The government will keep the infrastructure, and then we can just borrow the infrastructure of the government. And this decision was taken very late in the project because you simply not agree on the price.
And the train lines and freight lines were used at the moment, or nobody used that lines, and then you say, okay, we can use it.
They're both in use today. It's only or they were in use, now we're rebuilding, but the Grenaa line and the other line have been in use before, but they have not been connected. So it was one line going this way, one line going this way, and then we're connecting them at Aarhus Central Station and adding 12 kilometers of new tracks.
And they were owned by governments?
Yes, one was owned by government, the other one was owned by the Central Denmark region.
So there was a negotiation between
Long
different governments.
Yes, very long.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think at some point you just made a political point of view. This is what we'll do. You can never end this discussion if we want to do the project, and they wanted to do the project. But then all of a sudden we had to do all these agreements that, in order to actually do the project.
Then it's a negotiation on a lower level.
Very low, very practical project management.
Can you imagine how difficult that was?
Who operates this, who empties this letter bin, who empties that, and so on. Yeah.
Don't know if I need the microphone, but anyway. You didn't mention any state aid issues, and I could imagine that there would have been some in this project, or didn't you have those?
No, I didn't.
Not at all?
We did. We got 50% funding from the government.
Okay, but there was this windmill factory on the coast.
Yeah.
And I could have imagined that it would have been an advantage for them to revamp the railway, and that could have been a state aid issue, but that hasn't been.
No. To be honest, I think it's just as much as a political. Right now, they want to secure the opportunity to do it in the future. It's not in daily operation, the freight line.
But you didn't go to DG Comp to.
No.
Oh, strange.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at that.
But just to comment on that, because as Britta says, the line is actually already in operation. So the companies who were located there already had the opportunity to use freight, but they didn't do it. They used trucks and waterways and whatever. So it was mainly a political.
Yes, it's a political
request saying.
Was the real advantage?
The access were already there.
It's because we do
but then,
rail operation, we can't reduce the opportunity. But in order to be accessible and to have a secure platforms, we need to do something to the platforms.
Yeah, I understand that.
but again, this is we need another day for this. But as Britta says, this part was and is owned by the Danish state. It's part of the Danish state infrastructure management company. For the construction company, the state was a shareholder and put some of the equity into it. So the state was actually responsible for, since this was located on their part of the system, to undertake that they will get no non-objection from the Commission on this. And since the state, in this case the Ministry of Transport, are quite familiar with the state aid issues, I think they've done whatever they need to do so.
But to put it, that is of course very complex, but I think that because we acknowledge that this is from a stakeholder point of view critical and very difficult, and we took it, from a high political level down to a project level, initiating all the right groups at the right time, I think we got a consensus that this is a project we want to do. you know, we just have to get, you know, it's difficult, but you know, everybody had the urge to actually to finish the project.
So what happened to car traffic? Is it more smooth? And how about did you stop running the buses? And how about emissions? Have you measured the improvements in all these areas? And are people still biking in Aarhus or?
It's too early to say, I think, you know, because we've just started operation. So a lot of things we have now are on a theoretical, calculated level, and I think it's going to be interesting when we've been in operation maybe a year. Right now we've only opened the urban line in the city center. Within the next half year, hopefully, we will be open the rest of the network. And I think at that time, that's when it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what happens. And is the energy consumption equivalent to what has been calculated, or, you know, maybe you will get positive or negative experience. Also, when it comes to, you know, you calculate something on, you know, how much CO2 do you think you have per kilometers of driven tram. But it's also important to see, I think, at some point, how much is there per person you're actually in the train. Because it's only a success if we actually get a lot of people to use it. Right now, the first indications are higher than what was thought to be. But maybe that's just because it's the news. You know, everybody has to ride it first time. We'll see.
Yeah. I have a question for you as well. So, I really liked that you are the last presenter because you're one of the few Elena transport projects that have done the full cycle. So you first had the Elena project, and then you did your investment.
Yes.
How did you experience that transition? How did that go? Because your Elena project, the funding stopped, and then you were on your own.
Yeah.
I mean, Klaus was still there, but you were on your own. So
Yeah.
how did you feel about it, but how did that work?
Actually, I think we were lucky because in some ways we were doing almost at some points construction and Elena project at the same time. But because we were doing construction on the urban line first, we had the time to finish a lot of these agreements with the two other lines before we actually started rebuilding there. And I think that was important way of us to handle the project. Because if we had sat down and said, okay, we're going to finish all these contracts before we start constructing, maybe we wouldn't even have started constructing it because we still have a few agreements to finish. Yeah.
So it was actually a real benefit to start constructing early, even though you had to tinker maybe now.
Yeah.
That helped you. Just you jumped into the deep end.
Yes. But that's because time was important from our owners.
Yeah. Other questions? What I see is that I was just in Vienna, and they had for the first time they organized a workshop where they had the city planners, the big railway infrastructure guys, and the public transport companies, and the big freight corridor guys in one room. That must have been spectacular, very difficult. And one of the bottlenecks was that indeed the track usage, long distance, short distance freight, long distance, short distance for passenger, it all comes together. Huh? So and I see that you've made a lot of work in doing the balancing the discussions about that.
Yeah. Very right. But also at some point, what we haven't even discussed today is that we also had to find, you know, a design concept that took these two different systems and still made it look like one system for the customer. So we've actually tried to, you know, we bought two different kinds of trams, one that can go up to 100 kilometers an hour, one that can go up to 80 kilometers an hour. But we actually had to take both those trains into one sort of design loop to make them look similar. I think I had a slide on that previously. And we've done the same for platforms. So in the city center, we built new platforms, and they look like one thing. And then at the road railways where we're rebuilding, you know, we were trying to also make it look the same, even if the technical challenges are completely different.
Excellent. And I think that was what I really liked and what Klaus said. Elena is also about doing new forms of public procurement and doing it differently. And what I sense from you is that you wanted to have solutions that were simply not on the market. Huh?
Yeah.
And how did you go about finding
But
the
I also
expertise
think
and
that
the companies?
The funding that we got the funding from Elena, at least from our stakeholders, made it also they're maybe a bit more risk willing
Okay.
to look for alternatives, to take that risk. And sometimes it went good. We actually saved money and went faster, and other times it didn't go so well.
Okay.
But I think because we got the funding, that was okay. If we didn't get the funding, I think we would have, from a risk management point of view, gone the safe way.
Yeah. Excellent. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions from you? We talked about them. Yeah.
Yes, when there is such a big project that involves many citizens and municipalities and regions and states, do you, or how can I say, do you do a cost-benefit analysis? I mean, maybe if you do a very strict cost-benefit analysis, it says this is very expensive, but at the end, always politicians says, okay, this is a bit for the future, we have to do it, and we will find it, or our sons will find it there. But do you do this cost-benefit analysis?
You have to.
And do you have many externalities?
I don't know if it's the same, but in Denmark, when you go through and want to get government funding for projects, what you do is that you do a pre-analysis of a project. So you do your pre-analysis together with the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. Those two combined with a business case on the project, a risk analysis, what means of saving in the project is part of the package that the politicians have to look at when they deal with your project. And it's the same every time. It's described how to do it.
Yeah, in mobility, many times, what you plan, you say we will bring I don't know 200 million passengers a year, and at the end it's only 80.
Yeah.
So, and if you put money there,
Yeah.
it's not enough to pay. I mean,
Exactly. And the thing is that in our project, if we were to do a good business case, we would have said we would just do a business case for the center city, because that's a very good business case. But we have to travel very far along the blue line to very few passengers. But that becomes more of a
social.
yes, and sort of also we want to have a whole region, not just somebody to. It's for them, yeah. So in that sense, it becomes mobility. It becomes a priority to secure that the whole of the eastern Denmark is connected to the city of Aarhus. But you cannot make a good business case on it.
Yeah, because you could not look at the land value, or do you see already the cost of housing? I
Yes,
see.
we do
So
already see that.
already see that the cost of buying
That's
an
the one we
apartment
get
in
with-
those villages
In
is
this
up.
process, we have been in dialogue with real estate companies, and that
Excellent.
is what we see. And we also do see that there are a lot of developments going on along
Yeah.
Letbane. There are new hotels coming, new redevelopments, and it's all densification
Excellent.
around. And that's part of the municipalities to secure that the investment we're doing in the infrastructure will be followed up by densification.
So then it becomes one of the business case sources is basically land value
Yeah.
and tax,
Yeah.
real estate tax.
But
Yeah.
that's something we're looking into
Business
for
rates.
stage 2.
Yeah.
And we're actually looking on what has been done, is to how do you actually make what has been done of studies to evaluate the different alignments. How can we make a common tool to look at land values, and more mobility, and how can we put that up in a systematic way to say, is this route better or this route better? Something like that is important for us, for our stakeholders and politicians when they have to decide how to build the next stages.
But it doesn't help your business case. It helps politicians
Mhm.
to say,
Exactly.
we made a good
And-
decision. In the end, see the prices are developments.
And I think it's, I mean, I don't know, it's my own point of view, and I think if we do, for instance, stage 2, we will do a bit of the same. We will have a business case for one that we know is a good business case, and then you'll add one in that's probably not as good of a business case, but you want it. The politicians want it in that, and because it's part of the urban development, it's part of the mobility, it's part of the vision. It's
Part of the climate agenda too.
exactly.
I think that's a really good closing remark, because what these tram lines are not just a few colors, a few stripes, but it means a lot for your whole region, for your country, for growth, for accepting new people to come in, and a lot of economic growth. So I really like that as a closing statement. It also brings down the essential of Elena, which is about sustainable mobility, urban mobility, and thinking about it as a system. And I think you've proven here in your presentation that you've done this really well. So this is. I would like to invite you for a round of applause for Britta for coming here. Being the last one. So I think this also concludes the Klaus and Henrietta show. We, and together with Kai, who has given us the opportunity to moderate, he had given us the trust to do this. Didn't know who we are, but Klaus and I will continue to push, support, and invite you to work with Elena Transport. There's a lot of know-how from you, from Barcelona, from Madrid, from Amsterdam in the room. You can build on that. You have our phone call, our contacts, and please contact us. Please contact each other. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, Kai, to be here. Thank you.